Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
If you're listening to this by now, Graham Platner is out of the Maine Senate race. We've covered his campaign a couple times on premium episodes, but decided with all the latest news surrounding his campaign,
plus the fervor with which this is being discussed in progressive media,
we thought we'd do something on the Main Feed episode. Graham Platner was credibly accused of sexual assault, prompting him to announce that he would be suspending his campaign. He still maintains his innocence and denies the allegations, but it looks like his aspirations to defeat Susan Collins and take a seat in the U.S. Senate have been cut short. Before we get into that with our guest, let's talk about Susan Collins. She's 73 years old, born in 1952 in Caribou, Maine, into a prominent Republican family that owned a long-time lumber business. If you've watched Twin Peaks, you can imagine Packard Sawmill. That is all that comes to mind for Mike and I when we hear about lumber. Both of her parents served as mayor. Her father served in the Maine legislature. She graduated from St. Lawrence University in 1975. Now, when people talk about Susan Collins, you often hear them call her a swamp creature. She spent 12 years as a Capitol Hill staffer for then Representative, later Senator William Cohen, learning congressional politics behind the scenes. She rose to become staff director of Cohen's Senate Oversight Subcommittee and built a reputation as a policy and management expert rather than a public-facing politician.
She was a wonk.
So you can see in those early years how she kind of came to be stiff and boring, very concerned with the bureaucracy and the process. Well, she leaves Capitol Hill in 1987 to join Republican Governor John McKernan's cabinet as Maine's Commissioner of Professional and Financial Regulation. She did some, easy-to-forget work for the Bush senior administration. She ran for governor of Maine in 1994. Won an 8-way Republican primary, becoming the first woman nominated for governor by a major party in the state. She lost the general election, finishing third behind independent Angus King and Democrat Joseph Brennan. In 1996, her former boss, William Cohen, retired from the Senate, creating an open seat that launched her successful Senate campaign. William Cohen endorsed Susan Collins, helping propel her through a competitive Republican primary. Throughout the course, she sold herself as a moderate. Here's a clip from deep in the C-SPAN archives of her describing her vision for representing the state.
I will continue the thoughtful, independent, and moderate approach of Bill Cohen. I always would put the public interest above any private interests. I would always continue the approach that he had. That varies very greatly from the approach that Joe Brennan had in his 4 years in Congress. He voted a straight party line 93% of the time. Bill Cohen's party line voting is about 55 to 60%. I don't think either party has all the answers, and I think we need someone who is going to take an independent approach. That's the approach that I would take. That's what served Maine best.
Centrist Maxine. Well, she won that election.
In 1996. I just want to put a pin on that one.
She benefited from the state's tradition of electing centrist Republicans, and she went on to win 6 more Senate elections, often by attracting independents and moderate Democrats, while maintaining that base of Republican support. She's one of the Senate's most senior Republicans, giving her influence through committee assignments, especially on the Appropriations Committee. She frequently markets herself as a check against Republican presidents, but she almost always sides with the Republican Party when it matters most. She cast the decisive vote to confirm Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, despite widespread opposition over sexual assault allegations brought against him, badly damaging her bipartisan image in the process. And shocker, you'll never believe this, she voted to acquit Donald Trump in both impeachment trials. She opposed convicting Trump after January 6, even while saying she thought he bore responsibility for the attack. She became known for her statements expressing concerns about Trump and then turning around to just back Republican priorities no matter what. This led critics to mock Susan Collins. The Susan Collins is concerned meme. This is from Janet Mills' campaign. This was an attack ad that featured that prominently.
I'm also concerned.
Collins is always concerned, but never courageous. Caving to Trump on healthcare,
Concerned.
on affordability,
Concerned.
on ICE.
Concerned. I am very concerned.
Susan Collins, 30 years of concern, never enough courage.
That was of great concern to me.
Susan Collins.
I just want to say that, like, Mills is toast, but that's not a bad ad. It's pretty funny. Anyway, Collins voted for Trump's 2017 tax cuts and basically every other money grab for the rich done with malice to harm the working class. She voted to confirm Scott Pruitt and Lee Zeldin, radically destructive figures for the environment, Betsy DeVos, Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem. So Maine is in New England, as you may know. And Democrats really smell blood in this election, with the country feeling like a big pile of shit right now, let's be honest, right? Feel like an opportunity to knock off somebody like Susan Collins finally, after all, right, guys? Many Democratic activists wanted a candidate who would attack Collins head on for that reason, not a cautious establishment-run campaign. And this guy Platner, he really fit that mood. He's a Marine veteran, oyster farmer. We've covered him twice on previous premium episodes. A political outsider with no voting record that you can attack. And even after earlier controversies in his campaign came up about old Reddit posts, which were very weird, and a Totenkopf tattoo, which is a skull, and it's like does it have crossbones on it? It's like a little weird Muppety Nazi skull, basically. Democratic primary voters largely stuck with him. So it was mostly the American public who were expressing concerns, but Maine voters seemed to stick with this guy. And he crushed the Democratic primary with roughly 72% of the vote, showing how that grassroots enthusiasm he had built up could translate into electoral prowess. And then we got here.
And we won. And now they are not going to let us have it. Not if it's me. And so we're suspending campaign operations. I want to make clear, though, I intend to file my paperwork to withdraw. The process needs to assure that what comes next is reflective of the Mainers who on June 9th turned out and showed that they are desperate for a different kind of politics. It needs to be driven not from back rooms, but by the will of the people. And the decisions that come next must come from that. All we were asking for was health care, was to end a genocide, to use our taxpayer dollars at home to uplift our communities instead of waging war overseas. We were asking for a fair system. We were asking for an end to the corruption, the end to the money in politics. We were asking for real democracy, and we did it the right way, and we won. But now the ball is in the court of the Democratic establishment.
Well, here we are. Not many defenders for Platner these days. Jared and I, we covered some of the people, some of the colorful figures who are out there defending him. And it's Nick Fuentes, Richard Spencer, Owen Schroyer, who recently rebranded as a kind of, I don't know how to describe it, like a dime store pedophile look, a very bizarre look. And today we wanted to focus not only on Platner's collapse, but on the drive to beat Susan Collins, to actually do something constructive in this state. So this episode, we didn't want to just focus on the debacle around Platner's campaign or his personal life, quite frankly. We wanted to talk to somebody who lives in Maine and someone who's done some reporting on this topic and who is feeling, I think, safe to say, a little discouraged about this situation, given the opportunity we had to eliminate Susan Collins with this guy. Nathan Bernard is here.
Nathan Bernard's the founder of Bernard Media, home of the juiciest, steamiest BMs you can find online. He's also a contributor to Dropsite and many other publications, and he's been covering Graham Platner's campaign for a while now. Nathan, what's up?
How's it going? Yes, I have been around the Platner campaign since day 5, maybe very, very early on, and written numerous stories for Dropsite, covering the campaign from the ground and how people have felt about some of these controversies, how he's overcome them, looking and comparing what the national media might be saying when people are feeling a different way here, and kind of navigating now, reporting with Dropsite, what the process looks like to replace Platner, and really understanding how the people that supported him feel now that these allegations have come out and what the path forward might look like for them to contribute their time, but also just for the state and Democrats here to try to replace Susan Collins.
So for people who don't know, Nathan was kind of like in, I guess, what do you call the posting wars? What do they call it? The meme wars? Is that what they call them on the right? Whatever the
great
left
meme
version
wars,
was.
dude.
With me and Jared, we have taken our lumps. We've all seen therapists for years. I mean, this is like I first met you, I think, in 2017 during. I was pretty early in the Trump era, just from Twitter. I think like something like that, right?
Yeah, I think I knew Jared before you, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Milk Leaks, I think I met Jared over, not to do too much of a deep cut for people who have no idea what we're talking about.
Milk Leaks, no, it's okay. I think they need to know. Milk Leaks, it was Baked Alaska, right? Is he the one who needed milk?
Yeah.
So Baked
Yeah, because when he went to Unite the Right and got pepper sprayed in the face, and instead of acting tough, just like moped around being like, I need milk.
Yeah, he can look, I need milk with
Yeah, the bear mace straight to the face.
Yeah, and you stuck it to him pretty hard. You made an entire website around milk called Milk Leaks around Baked Alaska, and it was very funny. And you lived in New York, is that right?
Yeah, so I can give some context to coming up to Maine. So my mom's whole side of the family lives up in southern Maine. We've had this cabin up here from our grandparents, which was just kind of rocks and forest for about 80 years. They had the foresight to get the land and make it a place where our family would always come together. And I guess we met almost a decade ago now, I feel like, probably a decade. We've been in and around internet friends and in-person friends here and there. I moved up here in 2018, towards the tail end of my Bernard Media fame. And I had a remote job. I wanted to try something different from where I was living in New York. I'm not sure, Mike, if you ever came over my apartment in Fort Greene or in Bed-Stuy.
We met around there for dinner. Did we go to like a Bavarian? Did I have some sort of Bavarian pretzel? I was very intoxicated.
We got shit-faced. Yeah.
We got shit-faced. And then we went to see what was the last island. They were already eliminated from the playoffs. The last Islanders game of the year when they were playing at Barclays Center. Yeah, and I got so stoned, I got lost. I got lost multiple times trying to find the men's room.
Yeah, well, we were ripping the vape pen, I think, in the men's room. Yeah, we were riding high.
Real degenerate hours, and you learned the important Islanders chant, which is yes.
Hell yeah,
which doesn't make sense. Yeah, so that's what we did. I don't think I went to your apartment, but then you moved up to Maine. You settled in. And I would say, I think you're a Mainer.
To be a Mainer, you have to be born here, which is always funny because I've been up here since I literally was born, but it's a nativist thing. You have to be born in Maine to be considered a Mainer. Um, but yeah, I moved up here now close to 8 years ago. I met my now wife, which kept me up here. And at first I was living in Portland. Now we're up in Waterville, which is about an hour away from anything good in Maine. It's central Maine, so we're an hour away from the coast. We're an hour away from the lakes. We're an hour away from Portland. So yeah, it's we're in dead center in the state.
So you said you encountered Platner 5 days into the campaign for the first time. How did that happen? And what were your kind of initial impressions of the guy and his campaign?
So I have a good friend up here, Andy O'Brien, who I think Mike might follow his newsletter or know him from the internet.
I do know him. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I have read his work.
So a good friend of mine who, when I moved up here, we both wrote for an alt weekly here together. So that's how I kind of started writing about Maine things. And they were weird enough to look at milk leaks and all this and say, "Oh, that's cool, man. Like, you should write actual stuff for us." Um, and Andy's in the AFL-CIO. He is tied into labor, and it was a few days after Platner had dropped his epic release announcement video, which many such cases, uh, also many such cases where those guys are completely full of shit and fall flat on their faces immediately afterwards. So I was pretty skeptical. Andy invited me to come to a private party, which was for Troy Jackson, actually, his gubernatorial campaign, who is a progressive guy here. And the labor unions love him. Platner was there only by happenstance, because he was catering the event and had previously signed a contract to shuck oysters and give out food at the event. So he was literally there shucking oysters. And then later that night, they forced him to give a speech and everything, which was not pre-planned. I will say, I mean, he absolutely crushed it. And everyone that was there, I felt bad for Troy Jackson. He had gone so viral on the internet, which just kind of speaks to the power of the internet. Everyone wanted to see him. My first takeaways from it were, wow, genuine talent. That guy knows how to wrap a room around his finger. Also, we were drinking beers and just chatting. He knew about the hospital that had shut down the street from where we live. That was the last labor and delivery unit in Waterville, where we are, which is not, there's 16,000 people that live here, but that's considered a relatively mid-sized city for the state. So he was in touch with things that were going on, seemed like a smart guy, uh, genuinely charismatic and genuinely cares. And I think even to this day, despite his shortcomings, cares about the things that he was talking about and believes in. Yeah, I could have never guessed all the mess that would come later.
One thing I have noticed about Platner is he presents as working class in a way that is pretty convincing. He seems like a guy who works for a living. And that seems kind of rare in progressive spaces to me, which is weird because it's filled with like academics and people who haven't really held, jobs that, are either manual labor or like, working with your hands or standing on your feet. Was that something that people saw in him? And, is that something that would appeal to Mainers in particular?
Well, to the first point, I was invited to that Troy Jackson party because labor supported this guy. And when they said you should come check him out, it was because labor was backing him. So later he would get the actual endorsement of the AFL-CIO, but the people in the labor movement certainly believed he was the best person to represent their interests and genuinely wanted to represent their interests. I think the working class stuff, It's interesting because when it was first presented, it was that he's an oysterman, he works with his hands, he works on the sea, he's been a Marine veteran, a working class background. I think there's been debate over the validity of his background. I think there's such a broad range of what it could be defined as to be working class, though, right? Like then when these polls came out, for instance, for Maine voters, there was a huge uproar because people that didn't have college degrees and were white weren't supporting Platner in droves or something.
Right.
But to me, I know plenty of working class people that have a bachelor's degree. I
Of
know
course. That's
plenty
of
of
course.
teachers that have a master's degree, right?
Yeah.
Um, so none of that like made sense to me. And I think people here they just thought that he has lived experience, and he's certainly not a billionaire. He's certainly not a millionaire. His dad helped him buy his house, but if you own a home and you're a millennial, like you kind of need some sort of support. It's impossible otherwise, unless you come from extreme wealth. So I don't know. Everyone just thought it was, and people didn't really question that. Honestly, like that wasn't a thing that was under super scrutiny. At least I've talked to, no exaggeration, thousands of voters over the last year, and I just, I just didn't. That wasn't something that was coming up. And among the volunteers, that was not that. It wasn't. That wasn't a concern. That wasn't something that was on their mind.
I also feel like there's a big difference between like, oh, my parents had a pretty good amount of money and sent me to a nice school and like helped me out with buying a house and stuff, and like, Susan Collins, where it's like my parents are like have I come from a long lineage of Republican power in the state, and like nobody in my family has touched, could tell you how to operate a shovel.
100%.
We haven't cleaned our own house ever. Kind of wealth. And I think people know the difference of that. But when Graham Platner came on the scene, I mean, you mentioned he almost, shot off on impact, right? I mean, people got really, really excited by the possibility of his campaign, by the kind of message that he was putting out there. You said you've talked to thousands of people along the course of this campaign. Like what was it about him in particular that seemed to connect with Maine voters in such a profound way?
Uh, well, I think one part of it is genuinely the platform. I think we're seeing that in New York had all these super huge wins for DSA, and DSA didn't back Platner, to be clear, either. He wasn't a DSA candidate. I think, though, that saying that people deserve to own things like a house or not go bankrupt if you want to have a family, you should be able to go to a school that will reasonably educate your kids. You should be able to afford food. You shouldn't, worry about toxic smog in the sky. There might be better ways we can power our lives. That he a lot of the same issues that people in New York City might have, people here have, right? Like you can't buy a house, you can't afford your rent, groceries are super expensive. So there is parts of that too, where he's looking at everything around you and just telling you that, yeah, the hospital did shut down. You probably shouldn't have to go bankrupt to get medical care. These are things that people see with their own two eyes that say, "Oh yeah, you're experiencing the same problems as me. I can resonate. You know how much a gallon of milk costs." So there is that part of just the platform, which I think is pretty universal for a lot of these, you want to call it populist sort of candidates that are popping up around the country. I think the other part was just him, right? There truly, I think, despite now, of course, all of his totally absurd flaws, the guy had Riz, like
Yeah.
Maine is
You
not the
can't go
most
viral
exciting
like
place,
that
but
with your campaign announcement unless you got the juice, I mean,
no,
it's hard. It's not easy to get people worked up.
you can get dude the viral guy epic video launch from Fight Agency or whatever, right? Like Tom Steyer did that. Tom Steyer's not going around packing. Do you know what I mean? Though you can turn any guy into that guy.
Tom
But
Steyer's the
then-
perfect stand-in for a boring guy.
Yeah, ultra boring. And then you have Platner, who I went to so many of these town halls across the entire state. And if it was a big city, a small town, as I Maine is not a place where there's a million different options for you to go eat or something to do. This became a thing that people would go to. Like if Platner was coming to town, you wanted to see that. That was the shows here. So it truly became like an entertainment source for people. I hate comparing it to a Trump thing, but truly, if I was in those early MAGA 2016 big rallies and everything, I came away from this kind of getting that a little bit more. I was like, okay, so like culture's downstream from politics or whatever. I'm starting to get that kind of. And I'm also like, now that all of this has happened and he's out, he's withdrawing, and that's coming to an end, and how bitter that is for so many people that believed so hard in this. And to be clear, there's still people that fully have their signs in their yards and don't want him to drop out or anything. I can kind of understand the Trump people a little bit more of that. This thing, the ride is coming to an end, and they do not want it to end because this is the best thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
can see that.
it sounds like, you know, what I'm getting is that people didn't just like what he was saying, they liked him personally, right?
Yeah.
And I think a
Yeah.
lot of Trump supporters would tell you the same thing of like, you know, no matter who in the Republican Party comes up and tries to emulate him, you know, when Ron DeSantis ran for governor years ago, he was putting out campaign ads and doing stump speeches, even mimicking like the cadence that Trump talks in, going, well, you know, blah, blah. But among Trump supporters, it has to be Trump, right? And it kind of sounds like that, where it's like, yeah, we want all this stuff, but, you know, we like this guy specifically. It's got to be him. Well, let's start getting into like kind of what happened, because there seem to be, I'll call it like 3 stages of scandal that hit Graham Platner, and we covered this on our premium episodes. The first stage was like old Reddit posts, and then shortly thereafter, a Nazi symbol tattooed on his chest. That didn't seem to shake support for him at all. It seemed like support actually grew for Graham Platner after that came out, which I think it's very easy in hindsight for us to look back and be like, yeah, that was probably, that probably should have been it, man. You know, that probably should have cut the losses there and had some time to figure something else out, or figure someone different we could rally behind. But I'm curious, you know, as somebody who's spent a lot of time on the ground, talking to volunteers, talking to voters who stuck with him through that process, you know, why, right? You know, it's just, I'm curious to hear what you were hearing from people and sort of how they were able to get over those controversies.
So the first story I did for Dropsite, I've known Ryan Graham for a long time. I've known him not as long as I've known you guys, but through just the internet, right? And I wrote some stories for The Intercept as well, so I'd known him there. And I, the day that the Reddit story broke, the Reddit story and the Nazi tattoo story broke in the same week. He was having a town hall in Waterville where I live the exact day that the Reddit story broke. And I went to see him at the town hall, and I was like, man, no one's going to be here. It's going to be a ghost town, or people are going to be pissed, right? And they're going to ask a million questions about it. I showed up 30 minutes early. And again, I live not in the middle of nowhere, but this isn't a cultural site, right? There in the Union Hall was like a Veterans of Foreign War Hall, rather. It was already full to the brim 30 minutes before, 400 people in it. I ended up being in a crowd of 200 people outside on like a Tuesday night, super cold and rainy. It was in October. It was not like we just had speakers outside the um in the parking lot. I mean, multiple people there. One, because I started talking to people and seeing people that I know around here that I just never would have even expected. People I play basketball with, for instance, that like I would have never expected they would ever care about going to an event like this. And I saw them and I was like, wow, like, why are you here? A lot of them hadn't even heard about the Reddit stuff, right? Like, I'm a online man, so I had heard of it immediately. They hadn't even heard of it. If they had, a lot of people that were there, if they had heard of it, didn't care about it. And we're like, we all make mistakes. Who cares? Like, we all say dumb things that we can change, right? Which is a huge part of the whole narrative. And also that night, when he talked to the crowd, he just addressed it up front. It wasn't, there was no, I didn't say that. It was like, yeah, I said that. I made a mistake. My bad, basically. And like, not just my bad, like he took ownership for it. And everyone liked that. They were just like, oh, this guy, like he's been through some things, but he's a real one. Like, we get you. Like, so yeah, that was with the Reddit.
I
Yeah.
think
go on.
I just want to point out that I think the fact that the Totenkopf is not a swastika gave him much more run than he would have, or a swastika, or like a fascist eagle or something. It was like people had to Google what it was, I think, to a degree. But I personally, and I don't know if you felt this way among people in the crowd and stuff like that, I had a very hard time believing this man say that he doesn't know what the symbol. The main reason I haven't gotten a tattoo yet, and I have thought about it. I'm going to probably be thinking about it, and then I'm going to die one day. The reason I never got a tattoo is because I'm like, I can't get that permanently on me because it's not exactly right. I can't and I feel that once you get a tattoo, you break the seal and you're like, I'll just get 3, 4, right? But the first one's tough. And he's got this tattoo like right on his chest. You're not going to Google what it is, man. Like reverse image search what's on my chest. It to me, it strains credulity. Did you hear that from anybody? Like saying like, hey, maybe this is bullshit that this guy is running at us?
The whole movement of this stuff, and for the Reddit posts, I think was just clearly when everyone looked at it, because there was such a push of this anti-establishment thing, right? There's just the vibe of anti-establishment, whatever you want to call it, which no one likes Chuck Schumer. Everyone generally, I think across the board, most Democrats right now, why a lot of these populist candidates have success is because they're not Chuck Schumer and they weren't picked by Chuck Schumer. And you could just get up and repeat that. And then you have these attacks that they're like, oh, clearly they're just trying to take him out. And so
this
that
is a
works
real
like,
person. Real people make mistakes. Sometimes real people apparently get a Totenkopf tattooed on their chest.
the tattoo came out later in the week. And I also went to the town hall. My first story for Drop Site was the Waterville town hall and the Gonkwit town hall. So the day that the Reddit story broke, I went to that town hall. The night that the day the tattoo story broke, I went to that town hall. And the tattoo, definitely for people, I know people still to this day who that was a red line for them. They were done after that, right? For me, when I looked at it, one, personal opinion, right? I absolutely thought that at some point before the campaign, he must have found out what that was. I didn't know off the top of my head what that was. If I had seen that immediately, like I wouldn't be able to tell you that that was a Nazi symbol. Truly, I wouldn't.
99% of America would not.
That's why posting through it exists, to tell people that's a Totenkopf.
Yeah, but most people have no clue. So then again, it becomes a hit, right? And he says he didn't know about it. I don't know how much I necessarily believe that personally, but for me, my thinking on it was that, so what are they saying? Is he a Nazi? Because I know he's not a Nazi, right? And I know that he doesn't believe in fascism. I've heard in all these stump speeches and stuff as anti-fascist as you could get. And talking, if you look at the Reddit posts disprove that he would be a fascist. So I didn't believe what is the takeaway, right? That he's a Nazi. I could believe that he had poor judgment and that he made a stupid decision to keep it. But what's the choice in that we're presented with? Is it this guy who has a platform that we believe in that is starting to build at that time, just getting off the ground, something that seems pretty damn special, right? And I went to the Algonquin. This was in Algonquin, which is a beach town down in southern Maine, and I brought my mom to it actually, because I would drove down there, and I was like, "Hey, I'm doing a story. I'm gonna go. You should come and see this guy, and make up your own minds of what you think is going on, and hear him talk." Because she was texting me that, "Oh, the story came out, all this about the Nazi tattoo." And I went down there. I remember texting Ryan Grimm that day and saying, "Hey, if this place isn't packed to the brim, it's probably a bad sign because all these things have been packed to the brim." Um, it was jam packed, man. And like everybody that I went and talked to there, I must have interviewed like 50 people and I used maybe 8 of them or something for that story. Because I got there early. I was one of the first people there, right? And it's an old timey theater. I mean, the vast majority just it's like the Trump thing where it's like it's not I hate to compare it to Trump, but I think for your guys' show, it's actually good to have some parallels there where everything was an establishment attack. And to the part of what we were talking about before, part of it is just anti-establishment platform stuff. The other part was that it takes some balls to get up in front of you're getting reamed nationally. Everyone's saying your campaign's over, shut it down. To get up in front of like 1,000 people that are waiting, and the place is packed with media too, man. Like things that you could, tons of TV cameras, national news there, and he just crushes it. And you're like, some people have that skill, and you just
Yeah.
see that, you're like, whoa, that is ridiculous. Like crushes it up front, dismisses everything. That doesn't dismiss it. He's just like, I accept, like, again, just like takes ownership and then says sorry and then just goes straight into stump speech, anti-establishment. Everything around us is crumbling. These people don't give a shit. I do. Crowd goes nuts, man. I
So
mean,
it
yeah,
sounds like, it sounds like first of all, there are people out there playing dirty tricks and trying to smear progressives all over the place. So it's not like it's completely like tinfoil hat stuff, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean, all you have to do is look at this relentless campaign to claim that Zoran Mamdani is somehow like a secret Hitlerite Jew exterminationist when if you like take a sober look at the guy, you're like, what the fuck are they talking about?
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of Jews have looked at him, soberly and have a positive view of him and a negative view of Netanyahu, which was one of the happiest polls I've read recently. But that means true AIPAC has, are trying to hammer anybody who is critical of Israel. And Platner was. And a lot of people want to hear that message. And so it's very easy to think like, oh, I mean, look what they're trying to do to other candidates who are critical. It's the same thing. I mean, going after Platner makes sense for them.
Yeah,
So
and even more broadly than that, I mean, you have all of these, giant industry super PACs and groups, as soon as a candidate starts talking about raising some taxes or giving out some health care or questioning, how come it doesn't feel like real change is possible? You've got oil companies, tech companies, fucking private school, like the guns come out, right? The moneyed interest comes out because it's a threat to them and their continued generation of wealth, right? So I feel like that sentiment that like, oh, this is just them trying to take him down. I feel like I can see where that comes from a sincere place, right?
yeah, it is. I think it is since like it is being in so many of those rooms. It was all the things he's saying again. I think he does believe, and I do now that he's withdrawing and dropping out, just what I'm trying to explain, there was an it to the guy, right? There was just a piece of that where some of this stuff was just like, I thought going into that Algonquin theater, I was like, wow, this could end really badly. And instead, like my mom came with me, she left, she was like, oh yeah, I'll send him a donation. And I was like, wow, okay. Um, so I think the one thing that we haven't noted is that on the other side of this primary at that time is Janet Mills, a 70-something-year-old career politician who's done this political game her entire life, who has the backing of Chuck Schumer, who is getting all this money, who is pro-Israel, if we're talking about that stuff, which is a huge part of his a huge part of his stump speech, right? That we're going to end forever wars. I've been there. It exploits adventurism in youth to throw them down a rabbit hole of patriotism that could end in fascist feelings. And I agree with that, right? It's just the things he says, it's hard to disagree with. And on the other side, you have someone that just so cleanly represents everything that is flawed with our moment of these geriatrics trying to hang on to the last strings of power they have. And you have a guy that is 41, is posting on the internet and has things like that for the younger folks that you can relate to. We all have internet pasts. Like shit, man. We were just talking about our internet past. Like we all have some form of internet history. And he's had his own struggles and things too that a Janet Mills probably can't relate to. So it's the comparison also, she was a perfect figurehead just to bash away at, basically.
Imagining the field day that Oppo research would have listening to, what is it, 123 episodes now of this, 122 of this podcast?
That gives us kind of like phase 3. And then I guess eventually we could call it phase 4 of like the scandals around Graham Platner's campaign. That came through a New York Times story that included accusations from several former romantic partners of Platner's, detailing intimidating behavior, inappropriate physical behavior, threatening behavior. Did that, I'm curious, when you were covering the campaign and talking to people, did that get kind of ingested there as more of this establishment attacks? And then, fast forward to the story that came out last week in Politico, where a former romantic partner alleges that he raped her. That has obviously impacted the campaign in a much more intense way. But yeah, curious for any sort of insights you have about how the campaign, its volunteers, supporters, and stuff sort of have weathered the last month up until this campaign falling apart.
Well, I'll say for the New York Times story, if we want to move on to the sexting stuff. I know from my point of view of hearing just about it well before the story hit that at this point, the campaign, Janet Mills has dropped out. She's so far behind. And if you're here seeing this, the grassroots, genuinely, whatever you want to call it, infrastructure from the bottom up, we're now deep into this. It is built out, man. Like there are so many people involved in this thing across the entire state. And he's so far ahead. Like it's not even a question. Janet Mills, on her side, is not even showing up to any of this stuff, right? She's doing no town halls, she's doing no public events. I had a scoop that I just directly posted on Twitter of where in April she was supposed to do a debate and dropped out like 2 days before. And of course, like 900 people had packed the whole house and taken every RSVP to go to this thing. And she drops out 2 days before and just says, oh, I have scheduling conflicts. So again, he is dominating basically, and she knows she's going to lose. She drops out. We're coming up to a week before the primary where he is just, as a complete nobody, and really not just him, just all of these volunteers, all these organizers, all the just supporters, the people that have showed up to this town hall, gone to the on the trail, they're like, "Oh yeah, we did that," you know? And we're about to show up and just vote this guy into the moon. Like, we're gonna destroy it. So everyone is so bought in, and then this story hits. And when I first heard about it, the New York Times story, it started with rumors of sexual assault and the most gruesome stuff you could imagine, right? Uh, and then over the next couple of days was, oh, it's going to be BDSM. It's going to be some fetish stuff he had. It would just, the rumors started just bouncing everywhere. People in the campaign, I know for a fact, were concerned about what was going to come out. I had found out, which means that a lot of other people that are much better connected than I am had found out that the person making these accusations was a Heritage Foundation staffer, the Lindsay Fifield lady, who was not just a conservative, but had been pretty public facing in conservative media, had done a podcast with Bethany Mandel, and had ulterior interests. She started a group, Ladies for Kavanaugh, that was going to, that architected what Susan Collins would later go onto the Senate floor and say to back Brett Kavanaugh. So there's all this buildup. People are hearing about this. When the story drops, it's nothing sexual assault. It's unsettling relationships. I cannot overemphasize, and even for me, was astonished by people that are honestly some boomers and older people for sure, but also people that are just friends and are not super political and certainly not super to the left or anything. Were just like, maybe because so much had been repeated so many times about the establishment and elites, but they're like, this is a fucking elite hit job, like just going in on it. And that story, I think, actually had a opposite effect. I know every indie media person was looking at it. Oh, there's no corroboration. There's one person that was in this story. It's getting banged out and just turns like all this stuff where controversy comes out, huge fundraising day. In this case, just massive turnout. And a week later, he goes on to get 72% of the vote. And not only just that, like dominates a two-term sitting governor who basically threw up the white flag. Not basically, she did before the campaign, the primary. You know, at that point, she's also going out and saying, well, I'm still on the ballot, guys. You can vote for me. Um, I covered the polling sites on primary day for Drop Site, and I ran into Janet Mills actually in the morning in Waterville. And so she was like out there hanging out. She told me she was going fishing later in the day. She like wasn't, she was done campaigning. Like she did not want any part of this at all by that point. And what did he get? I think he got 154,000 votes. It was the most votes anyone's ever gotten in a primary in Maine state history. Right. So that story
That's
just
crazy.
completely backfired. It yeah, translated into just a genuinely historic turnout that when that happens, all the people involved with it, I mean, they're like, we're going to the Senate. Like this thing, we're about to absolutely annihilate Susan Collins. Like, people
Psychologically,
are
this makes
right
sense
now.
to me, what you're talking about, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Where the very people you are trying to destroy, Susan Collins is like the avatar of of the establishment, of the wealthy, the people who've been fucking over these voters for a long time. So if you look at the Graham Platner situation and say like, oh, they're trying to rat fuck this guy. The establishment is trying to rat. Well, then, you come out in force and say, actually, fuck you. This is the one option we have to say fuck you to your rat fuck.
Well, and there's just so few opportunities for like that kind of excitement in American politics, right? Like we saw this in the 2016 Bernie campaign. We've seen this throughout several points. Like Zoran Mamdani had that kind of excitement, and now he's the mayor. But these are few and far between for American voters. And I can understand why somebody would kind of go through these rationalizations in their mind to not want to give it up. Because you're excited. You're like, oh my God, this is possible. And then you get 72% of the vote and set a record. And you're like, oh my God, it's really possible. And you don't want to believe that it's not. Right. So I kind of get it. But then this story hit last week, the one I mentioned, where a former romantic partner describes the situation to Politico. That is a rape. That I think most people would read and go, that's rape. That's the end of the story. That's the end of Graham Platner's political story. The response to this story was markedly different in that a lot of the immediate reactions I saw online from Platner's supporters, it's, certainly plenty of his critics, were, instead of defiant, instead of like, it's another establishment rat fuck, it was just almost immediately heartbreak, disappointment, and these feelings of betrayal. What do you think it was about this story that, changed the mood in ways that the previous stories hadn't?
I think the other ones, and I think Mike, you actually first you got in touch with me because I'm in so many different chats and everything, really just as a lurker, right? To see what the mood is in these volunteer chats, and I just know a ton of them at this point because I've gone to so many events. They know I'm writing stories. They know I've been covering it, and I've been around it for a long time. Immediately, the mood was different, right? For all this stuff, where if you were to look at, if you were to look at how this like felt after any of these other stories, you could just say it's a rat fuck, uncredible. The source is uncredible. The motive is uncredible. It's coming from the establishment or it's coming from the opposition, right? This lady in some of the chats, it's really interesting where you watch them. I watch them analyze it in real time as it's happening. And it's like, well, this person has exactly the same politics as us, though, right? So what's the motive? And then when you look at the credibility, well, now in the New York Times, there's no corroboration. Now there's corroborating evidence, right? There's more to look at in this story. And what was her motive years ago to get in a relationship with this guy and be assaulted to what? Screw him 5 years in the future or whatever when he's suddenly running for Senate. So there was an immediate just tragedy and despair in all these volunteer groups that just didn't exist before, where in the past it would harden them and say, oh yeah, let's go. Like, let's go prove them wrong.
Yeah.
This was a much more material thing. And there was just there's evidence you can't dispute in it. And in the other stories, they had expected something this bad, and then it didn't deliver. But then this delivered. And I think just how the internet works, for better or worse, we're all internet people. Things moved so fast to come to a conclusion on it that I think all these people are online as well, and they're looking at all these huge independent media folks also who have come to different conclusions on different stories, and they're also reading that. People read that stuff, millions of views on these things, right? Um, and there was no question that this was an absolutely horrible thing and that he's probably going to have to step aside. That doesn't mean that all people in Maine right now feel exactly that. Trump, for instance, has been accused of absolutely horrible things, and there's still people that are beyond bought into that movement. I think, though, that as we go down this path of replacing Platner, right, and finding a new person that's coming in, and we've been talking about the anti-establishment piece. Well, now the Maine Democratic Party is going to choose 600 delegates that are going to represent these 150K 200,000 people in total that went to the polls, but like 150,000 people I just voted for Platner are now being represented by the political establishment that they just fought for a year to overturn and did successfully. And now that's suddenly taken away from them.
It's a huge tragedy. It's a huge tragedy. Yeah. It really is, because you can the record turnout, the enthusiasm, everybody putting their hopes in this guy because he's charismatic and a good speaker, and he speaks to the issues that they've been wanting somebody to speak to, and you've been dealing with Susan Collins since 1996. As I was saying earlier, since DJ Shadow's Introducing came out, this person has been in the Senate. That's buck wild. I was in Chaminade High School when I wasn't reading the newspaper either. I was a complete moron when it came to politics. So I wouldn't even have known, but that's crazy.
Yeah. I'll say this one thing just to the whole piece, because now that's where we're at, right? It was a different thing. There are absolutely people in that enormous coalition that he built, because I see it and I've talked to people, right? After this, I'm about to go out and I'm going to have to go to back-to-back barbecues, right? With two very, very different groups of friends, and all of them are going to talk to me about this. I'm going to have to talk about this all night. And I got so many texts from people. Even yesterday, I ran into a group of friends that the first thing they said to me, they go, yeah, it was a hit, right? And also, but it was also true. Like, you can get rat fucked, but like, if the fucking is justified and there's things that are credible to do that rat fucking, then those both can be true. And I think people are kind of grappling with the idea that there was a whole industry built by mainstream media, the establishment, to investigate this guy and make sure that this didn't work. We don't do the same scrutiny of this for Chuck Schumer, for instance. I haven't seen.
Well, we've seen the people who vetted him. Have you ever met these people?
I did. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole. Well, maybe don't put this extraordinarily unsettling people. Like, I
really?
Keep away from
you
that.
Found them unsettling. I think the internet finds them so wonderful. I'm so surprised.
Yeah, the vocal fry guy. I met him twice. The first time I met his girlfriend first, and I was wearing a Nathan For You Summit Ice jacket. I don't know if you know.
Yes, I am familiar with that. Thank you.
But she came up to me and she was like, "Oh my God, Summit Ice! Like, you got to meet my boyfriend." And I was like, "Who is this person?" I was writing a story. I was embedded with volunteers for this story up at the campaign HQ, and I was like, "All right, I'll meet your boyfriend, whatever." And it ended up being the vocal fry guy who just today was accused of sexual assault. And my takeaway, I was like, sexual harassment. He was banned from Summer Lee's campaign in 2022.
Holy shit. You're telling me now for the first time. The vocal fry guy, oh my God. Well, no wonder he didn't see any red flags.
Yeah,
Jared, do you have audio of this gentleman speaking?
I do.
And at this point, you hadn't vetted Graham Platner. You hadn't done a full scrub of who he is. How did you go about vetting him? And why did you?
We paid a nice firm a whole chunk of money and got some stuff back. Some of what you've seen on the news we got back. Other stuff we didn't.
Did the vetting process turn up the tattoo that became so controversial?
Classic.
Yeah, that guy was extremely off-putting, and genuinely
we didn't read it, but we got it.
A lot of people in the campaign, I'll just say, not even the people that, left or whatever, they had huge issues with him. And I think he is effective in the things that he does. I think he has a talent of finding people that can fit these molds and do these casting call type recruitments, right? And from what I've heard of his work in Pittsburgh and with Summer Lee, he did genuinely transform the politics. Like, he was a huge force in transforming politics there. If Platner didn't have just extraordinary amounts of baggage, he would have been highly successful in this as well. Very, very unsettling dude. Came away from meeting him being like, wow, that was one of the most uncomfortable and awkward interactions I've ever had in my entire life.
Well, you become a lot easier to be rat fucked when you rape someone and don't tell people about it. And I just wanted to say something that we said before we started recording, which is that Platner looked in that last video, and I think part of the reason it goes on so long, because it goes on forever. It's like, why did he do an 11-minute video? It seems like he's slow motion trying to figure out what he did. He knows he was there with that woman. He knows what it is. I think that he was probably engaging in this type of behavior without realizing that it was rape or it was sexual assault, but that doesn't help. You know?
Or even if he was blackout drunk, I mean, you wake up in somebody's bed and you're like, huh, what happened? That's not a good feeling.
You can't go to a woman's house when she says, don't go there. Okay. You just can't do it. And, you know, I had mentioned this also. I wanted to get it into the last premium we did, but like I've dated in my 40s on these apps, and I know like what she's talking about when she says it's a situationship. And like there are pretty clear boundaries usually there, where it's like, yeah, we fuck every so often when we have nothing else to do, right? But like, don't get involved in my life. Don't come, you know, when you're not called, and like, let's set up a date when it's fun. In this case, she says, don't come. He comes anyway. From jump, you're already in a position where you could be accused of sexual assault or rape. And then he's like, apparently like blackout drunk or whatever it was. I don't know exactly how drunk he was, but yeah, it's very plausible. Very, you know, there's no explanation for it other than because why would she tell us this at this stage, right? You know, there's no reward for her for doing that. It's just a lot of shit on her and a lot of embarrassment.
I will say for that video, because I think this is a good kind of almost wrap up like of what we're talking about here. That video of everything we're talking about, though, of just and how the average voter or supporter or volunteer or anyone that was involved in this would feel is a pretty good reflection, I feel like, of just this. If we're talking psychology and the psychological state, he in that video is what they're not, it can't be me. They're not going to let us have it. They're taking what we've done away from us. We just want hospitals. We just want healthcare. We want to end the wars. We want these things. And I think a lot of people feel like it was taken from them after they've just worked so incredibly
I can
hard.
imagine. It must be like, it must be. Well, we started with Susan Collins, and we're going to transition to like how the real question here is how the hell can we get rid of this person? How in a second. But yeah, the line that stands out the most is the part where he's like, not if it's me, right? It's like, not if it's me. It's like deep down. He's like, he knows he's toast. And I'm sure he knows what he did. He may not think it's rape. And also there's a possibility like that, you know, they didn't have any communication afterwards or whatever. Maybe he's like have to revisit something from a long time ago. But whatever it is, anyone who did that sort of thing and was, you know, around there has done a lot of weird stuff with women because he obviously thought it was acceptable. But let's beat Susan Collins. Let's not make this a down. Let's beat this woman. She is really speaking. Come on.
People do feel like something was just stolen from them. I don't know how they come to terms with that over this process, which feels like to a lot of people, a Kamala Harris 2.0 situation with a bit more democracy, where you're not just anointing someone, but the party is going to, through a system, elect these delegates that's then going to speak for people. It would be ridiculous to think that no cohort within that 150,000 plus voters that voted for Platner, because this has been a year-long process of talking message discipline, anti-establishment. Establishment is rat fucking us. That the people then look at a party doing that, which we just failed by in the presidential election, and don't feel like now they themselves are getting completely rat fucked by the establishment and don't go out and vote. So to beat Susan Collins, I think was already a monumental task. When you look at polls, even after the rape allegations came out, Platner is still doing like 10 points better than Janet Mills, right? So there is something really deep-seated. It hit, like something was activated inside a lot of people. He just told them you're getting screwed and they're screwing us. And now people were like, yeah, you're right. They are screwing us. And now the final act of that campaign is those exact people screwing you again. And if like they don't, if there could be a Troy Jackson or someone that comes in and has that platform that kind of fits. But if I've made hopefully anything clear, is that there's no replacing the experience that myself included, right? Being around a lot of this just went through watching him do this stuff. You can't just, the platform is one part. You can't just inject in a Troy Jackson or a Shenna Bellows or someone and say, yeah, now this is the guy, go vote for him, go work for him tirelessly for the next few months to make this happen. It's beating Susan Collins was already an uphill battle. I mean, I hope something miraculous happens, right? But it feels like a long shot.
Yeah, I mean,
say the
it's
least.
like if you're a kid and your pet dies, and then daddy brings home like a new dog the next day, and it's like, no, see, this is the new dog. We don't have to be sad about that. We can get excited about the new dog. And you're like, but it's not the old
It's
dog.
not Fido. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the, and now all these candidates, Troy Jackson included, are saying we don't want his endorsement. We want nothing to do with him. And he did a terrible thing. To his credit, nothing of any of those, the terrible things that he's done to his credit. The guy just worked his ass off for an entire year to get this movement activated, right? There are so many people that still feel a tie to that experience, that shared experience, and he was obviously a crux of that experience. So, because people are weird and get tied into these, it's not a cult, and that's what all these volunteers have been saying, that it was never about one person, it's about the movement, it's about continuing this on. That will be true for some people, right? That will absolutely not be true for other people. And there'll be a whole other group of people that just feel that the establishment is screwing us again. Even if they like a Troy Jackson or someone else, that they come away feeling that way. And maybe they volunteered before and they don't want to now. And they still go and vote, though. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
but,
I figure
yeah.
a lot of them will just straight up disengage. Well,
And what about this guy, Nirav Shah? Is there any juice behind him at all?
The guy is juiceless, folks.
He seems very marshmallowy.
Quick bit on him. He got super famous because during the COVID pandemic, super famous as in Maine famous, he would do the Cuomo basement video version for Maine, where he would do a Zoom thing every morning and tell a dad joke. And he did a pretty decent job of explaining public health information in understandable ways. But it became a thing where we're all locked in our homes. You're seeing him every day. It's a TV show basically that he's doing. And he sold merch. He sold In Shaw We Trust mugs, which his cohort, and still to this day, is really like 50 plus moms who, would pour a bit of Pinot in their In Shaw We Trust mug, take a sip and listen to him tell a dad joke in the morning, and they'd be like, and this many people died. So
What
yeah,
about Miss Rachel? People are saying Miss Rachel should own her Maine roots.
Dude, I'm all in on Miss Rachel.
For people
If
who
she were
don't
to
know
run,
Miss Rachel, she does the children's what is it, a YouTube show?
yeah, it's a YouTube show.
It's a YouTube show.
She
My
kicks
kids were
ass.
too old, I think, when she blew up.
Yeah, she's awesome. Yeah, and she's like 42 and stuff too. So it's like, hey, she's from Biddeford. If she ever decides to run, that's my girl. Count me in. I'm Team Rachel. I think this time around, it's just all the people that are the losers that just lost their last race and now are like unemployed politician people. They're coming into this race. Like we have,
That's
everyone.
so grim when you put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, they're all losers. And it's like they like this one guy. This is the last thing I'll say about this. Like we have a whole slate of candidates. Most of them are, it's Nirav Shah, Shenna Bellows, Troy Jackson, all just lost their gubernatorial primary. Now they're in this. We have a guy, Jordan Wood, who complete grifter. He's the guy that pioneered those spam texts where it's like, I'm severely depressed. If you don't give me $1, I will ... Why
isn't he winning? Yeah. That's my candidate.
Oh, but he raised $2 million in the Senate race before Platner got in, withdrew because he was getting no support, went and ran in the 2nd district race, lost that primary, but raised, I think, $3 million.
I wonder how he raised all that money.
Well, those texts, you get blasted. And it's just national. It's not even in Maine, really. And then now he's back running for Senate again. He's like, I'm in, guys. So now he's back doing this. And then there is this guy who runs Maine Beer Company, which is a great beer, The Lunch, if you ever have a chance to try it. Genuinely amazing brew. Dog shit candidate. He was in the race, the Senate race, for 2 days, raised $250K. Chuck Schumer called him and said, Janet's getting in, you're getting out. He donated it all to Janet in day 3, endorsed her the next day. And now he's releasing all this stuff. He's like, it's a genocide. I want Medicare for all. Like, I'm an outsider outside the political establishment. Are we using the word cuck?
Are we allowed to use it from the left? Can we use the word cuck from the left, or is that forbidden?
Oh, he fits it to us. He held an announcement. Yeah, Cleban. And it's like all the Matt Iglesias guys and stuff were like, dude, Cleban was forced out of the race. If he was in, this would have never happened. Cleban is our man. And it's just like, suck my fucking dick. Like, yeah, this guy's a joke. So that's where we're at.
So
folks.
It sounds grim. It sounds grim.
Yeah, it is grim. Yeah,
will anyone ever beat Susan Collins?
I think, Nathan, you should fill Graham Platner's spot so that the national media can dig up milk leaks and all the weird supercuts of Baked Alaska. And you have, Chuck Schumer on MS Now being like, it does raise concerns that he would have spent so much time documenting such a strange man.
And then you can have interviews with me and Jared, and we can be like slightly giggly, and they'd be like, were you aware of this? Well, we were aware of Nathan's milk leaks thing and his comments about Mike Cernovich and Laura Loomer, but we didn't know all of it. And yeah, I did smoke some pot with him in the bathroom of the Islanders-Rangers game a few years ago.
Nathan Bernard,
hell yeah.
Thanks for joining and posting through it. We'll put a link to some of the stories you've written for Dropsite in the description of this episode, as well as to your social profiles and all that. But last question every guest gets on posting through it, because this is a music podcast at its heart, what kind of tunes you bumping?
Oh, damn. What have I been listening to? Actually, hold on. To answer that, I'm going to have to look. It's been, I'm listening to a lot. Oh my God, this is my guy. What am I talking about? Truman Sinclair. I've been listening to him, which I went down the road of, oh my God, Hudson Freeman is the guy. He had one really catchy, sad boy type folk, pop folk song. Do you know what I'm talking about? Exactly.
This feels like Jared's arena.
Yeah, so I went down that whole run. Daryl Ron is another dude that's been popping up. Silent Acknowledgement was the song that got me in for him. But Truman Sinclair, definitely Pale Horse, Pale Moon. That album is pretty sweet. And so that's he did a couple of live shows with Hudson Freeman where he was ripping harmonica and they were doing duets. So I would recommend Truman Sinclair. He's another Hudson Freeman type, but he's the man.
Well, I hit the freeway past the borderline at 9:05. I felt like seeing all the skies. I wear the necklace that you gave me when I made you mine. I think about it all the time. Well, I go to her just to watch it pass by, like a pale horse running on that pale moon sky. A ghost in the basement.